we all, there we go. So hello, everybody. Thank you for your interest and the steady attendance that I'm seeing throughout these showcase sessions that we are putting on this week. And we have Dr. Jenny L.R. here to talk to you about her lab. Dr. L.R., we could have the whole week on you as the showcase. The showcase could just feature you and all your good experiences and research and clinical and teaching and mentoring students and all kinds of good things. But we are here to hear about Dr. L.R.'s lab and the work that she is doing and how you can think about becoming potentially a lab research assistant for Dr. L.R. So Dr. L.R., if you want to go ahead and just start telling us a little bit about your lab. I think that would be helpful for everyone to start hearing.
So hi everyone, I'm Dr. L.R. and I am in the kitchen. There's Shika, how are you? I love to see your faces. If you don't mind turning on your face, I like to see it. It's always more fun to talk to people, real people, Jasmine, Mandy, than it is Jessica, than it is to talk to, there's Autumn, to talk to blank screens. So I appreciate y'all sharing that with me, even though I know that dogs may bark and stuff might happen. Been through all that and I'm fine with it. So first of all, let me just say thank you for coming, and also that as you are all finding out, or will be finding out as you attend these seminars, that your professors, who maybe you primarily think of as being your teachers, actually do this whole other thing too. And the other thing is research. And if you talk to me about my time and activities, it's a pretty even split. I spend a lot of time doing teaching and I spend a lot of time doing research, and I really love both activities. So one of the things that I find really great about my job is that I don't ever feel like I'm bored. So kind of from a job standpoint, there's always something new and interesting to do. And I worked some jobs when I was your guys' age, where I was the receptionist for a mental health center, and people would come on the hour and then there'd be like 40 minutes where nobody would be there. And then people would come and there'd be like 40 minutes. And the 40 minutes just drove me crazy. I like filed things, I organized, I cleaned. And so I wanted a job where, you know, I just felt busy and involved and stimulated the whole day. And my job as professor is that. If anything, it's probably that plus. But what I find is, like, I look at my watch and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock. How did it get to be 3 o'clock? And every day is kind of like that for me. And part of that is because, you know, what I do, and aside from teaching, which some of you I have in class, you know that I'm passionate about teaching and I'm waving my arms around. And in real life, I even do like a dance sometimes, a sing. Like I'll leave it in the classroom. Well, that's true for research too. So a lot of people who, if you go to their talks, they'll tell you that they have a research lab and they'll describe their research lab. And as Maria Carla pretty much hinted, right now I'm actually running 3 research labs. So yeah, so, you know, I run on that, like, this is a person who should not drink that much caffeine side of the world, which is true. So right now I have 3 research labs that I'm running. They're all broadly under the label of Thrive. So if you get an email from me, you'll see that you can click the Thrive link. And thriving actually stands for something about having healthy relationships in a nonviolent environment. But I don't remember exactly what our acronym is, but we got it to make the word thrive, because really from a clinical health psychologist standpoint, and I'm a clinician as well as a researcher and a teacher, we as health psychologists don't want to just keep people from psychopathology. All of you have had abnormal psychology. You know, we like to help people not be depressed, not be anxious, you know, kind of recover from these serious illnesses. But we also actually want them to really have this meaningful, beneficial, enjoyable, you know, healthy life, right? And so that whole kind of take on psychology is broadly encompassed under the rubric of positive psychology, which is really a component of health psychology. So I'm a positive psychologist, and that doesn't mean I'm positive every day. As my children will tell you, I'm not positive every day. A lot of days, but not every day. But it does mean that I believe that life is more than just surviving, that really it's about thriving. So we have 3 components of our Thrive Lab. And one of them is very relationship focused. So I was trained in graduate school under one of the preeminent marital therapists in the country who kind of developed the standard way of helping people recover in unhappy marriages from a behavioral perspective, which is, that was many, many years ago. And there's been lots of really important iterations and changes to what we do for couples now. But he sort of laid the groundwork, foundation for that. So I've always been very interested in relationships and systems dynamics. And what I've been interested in most for the last probably 10, 15, maybe 20 years is what happens when relationships break up? How do we break up? And I think we teach a little bit about healthy relationships, but we don't teach much about in adolescence about how do you actually get out of a relationship? How do you exit? And how do you exit in a way that's decent? And what we know is that when college students exit relationships and teens exit relationships, that a whole bunch of stuff goes on. Some of it on the continuum that actually leads to behavior that legally we define as stalking. So many years ago, we tried to describe that continuum and we called it unwanted pursuit behavior. So it's behavior that you're doing to sort of try to get the person's attention, get them back, figure out what they're doing. So now we talk about it as monitoring, surveillance, but the motivation really was like that you're pursuing this. And so one of the things we're currently doing in our lab, and we've been working on this for several years now, is the motivations for initiating contact with your ex. We're calling it the MICE scale, where people scurry around towards their ex-partner in a variety of different ways. Why are they doing this? And so we've actually been establishing a measure that says one of the reasons why people do this is personal gratification. So when they get broken up with, they feel like they're not attractive enough, or they're not good enough in some way, and so sometimes they pursue their ex-partner to show that they actually are good enough, right? And they look at who their ex-partner is with for those same kind of reasons. So that's one component of our scale. Another component is just looking for sex. Right? So it's not coming from sort of this underlying motivation, but it's more like I've already had sex with this person, so there's nothing going to change my status of myself by having sex with the same person again. So it's pretty much of a booty call. So turns out those are separate factors that aren't really happening with the same person. So we're looking at those as predictors of different kinds of unwanted pursuit behavior. Well, of course, when we started doing this, most unwanted surveillance and pursuit behavior was to some extent in person. Like, back in my day, you could make a hang-up call, but a lot of it was literally driving by people's houses, right? Now, there's so many other ways and possibilities that researchers are trying to look at. What are all the social media avenues by which people engage in these sort of unwanted pursuit behaviors and monitoring behaviors? So we have a social media study that we ran in our subject pool last year that looked at Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. We're actually in the process of revising that and taking some predictors out, making some changes to our scale, putting in new predictors. And in this iteration, we really want to look at TikTok as one of the forums. So, the problem with being a researcher in this space at all is that as soon as I know about something, that means it's been around for a while. And if I actually can use it, then people who are breaking up with people are not using it anymore, right? So very important to have young colleagues who are in this space, informing the research, figuring out the questions, figuring out where we're going, and that we're kind of doing this iteratively in a really timely manner to kind of get at all the trends and differences. So some of the big questions that remain are these online behaviors predictive of in-person behaviors? Is it the same people doing both? Is there a group of people that just do online behaviors, and what are the predictors of that? Are those different motivations than doing the in-person behaviors? What, you know, catapults people over into this category of what we would consider stalking? Are there time limits? Like, it's okay to monitor your ex-partner for the first month after a relationship, or 2 months, or 3 months, but at 6 months it's creepy and weird. So is there some kind of like statute of limitations, you know, after the breakup? Is it okay to do it, like, fine to do it once every couple of weeks? You're like, just go look at their Facebook page, see what's happening, and you don't post anything, you don't say anything, you just sort of check it out, and there's nothing particularly harmful about that. But if you're doing it every week and you're also posting a little snarky comment, or, you know, what are sort of the social norms and rules and regulations? And if these are sort of implicit social norms and rules, how can we teach people, hey, these are where you've crossed the line? Because the other thing that's really confusing about these breakup behaviors is that people do break up and get back together, right? And how do they know if they are okay to get back together? Some of these surveillance things actually are giving us information about opportunities. Oh, look, my person that I shouldn't have broken up with is now single again, and they're going to this bar. If I show up at this bar, maybe this or that will happen. How all of this is happening in a pandemic is completely unknown to us. We have no idea. So you can imagine a million different questions that come to your mind, because I know a million different questions come to my mind. Do you stay with people because it's really hard to find new people during a pandemic? Does it depend on your political party? Like, if people who are, you know, Democrats and are into mask wearing are now not getting into relationships at the same rate as people who are Republicans, who seem to be freer with their public health practices. All of those, I mean, the problem that I have is there's just too many questions and too little time. And the really cool thing about being an undergrad is that you have 40, 50 years ahead of you. And so you have all the time that I want to be answering and asking these questions, right? So that's the kind of thing we're doing in one of our labs. So our Thrive in Relationships. And it's really all predicated under the notion that good, healthy relationships, as we know, are conducive to good health. They're part of having intimate social support is probably one of the biggest predictors of longevity, of illness protection, particularly for men. So that's a whole nother thing, but gender differences and sex differences are also something I look at very closely, because I think sometimes we think everything functions the same for the two groups, but because of our social norms and the way we've been raised and how we interpret relationships, doesn't necessarily work the same. And it doesn't necessarily work in, you know, sort of cis relationships versus bi relationships versus gay or lesbian relationships either. So I have some research that looks at these same processes in different types of relationships. There's plenty of other really key factors to relationships that we haven't studied too. I have an undergraduate right now working in this particular lab who's interested in what is the breakup process like in the relationship that you lost your virginity in? And is that different than, right? And if you look at sort of early work on attachment and Lorenz's study of like imprinting, there's some thought that that first relationship that you have, deep intimacy in, particularly if it wasn't like a one-night stand, has more meaning and therefore also is more ego like threatening if that ends. So an undergrad who's looking at that, and she's actually put a measure in our scale that's about your attitudes towards virginity, which we know also varies by religion and race. And so you can see there's so much we don't know in that group. So that's me talking about one of the 3 labs. As Maria says, once you get me going, it's hard to stop.
No, that's not what I said, but because I'm enjoying every minute of this.
So the other 2 labs that I have going, I just want to say like a brief word about. The first one is Thrive After Sexual Assault. And sexual assault, as we know, is a very surprisingly prevalent phenomena. And the age group at which it's most likely to occur is college students. And in spite despite parents really wanting to believe that the college campus is safe, there's a fair number of things that happen on college campuses. So we are kind of a ripe ground for studying this, but also for doing prevention, early intervention, and post-intervention activities. So that group also has a group of graduate students working with it. And we have 2 big projects, I would say, going on there, or maybe honestly 3. Okay, 3 big projects. One is that we've been asked to work with the Title IX office to help them look at their processes for 4 different kinds of events that get reported to Title IX office. So people report sexual assaults, they report sexual harassment, they report stalking, and they report dating violence, all to Title IX offices. So we're looking at like the characteristics of those cases and also the process of how long do victims or survivors stay engaged, when is the drop off from engagement, what percentage of these cases actually go to adjudication, does it matter if the event occurred on campus, does it matter who the reporter is, does it matter, so we're just kind of looking, it's really exploratory, and it's kind of a process information for them. Just so happens that all the Title IX regulations were recently changed by Betsy DeVos. So we have, I think we're looking at like 3 years of data, and eventually those 3 years will be pre-data for all the changes. So we're actually coding literally every case that they have across the past 3 years. And that involved a lot of ethics boards review. Everything we get is it's redacted, de-identified. So they've had to go through and kind of take all the information about it out, since the people who are coding it are also faculty and students at our institution. They don't want us to know any details of any cases. So it's highly sensitive information, but it's really designed to improve services on campus. Along with that, we usually do an annual climate survey, and people around the nation have called for that. Last year, there was no campus violence and sexual assault climate survey at UNCC, but prior to that, we've been doing one for 4 years that was funded through a grant with like 9 other universities. So we did get the university to agree to help fund to do another campus climate survey, and we're trying to find an institutional home for that so it happens every year. So we're working with the Student Life Office to try to invest some resources into making that happen. The campus climate survey was really directed towards undergraduates, and our campus has more than undergrads. It has graduate students. It also has faculty and staff. So we're trying to actually get a broader picture, and doing that means that we have met with the LGBTQ+ caucus to make sure we're asking the right questions in terms of gender and sexual minority health. So hopefully y'all will see a campus climate survey in the spring that UNCC launches, and we're kind of the behind the scenes people trying to get nationally, normed questions to assess this in a reasonable manner. One of the problems with campus climate surveys is even if you do them, the response rate is very low. So those of you who've taken research methods, often with the survey, if you get 30, 35%, you're pretty happy, which even that is really scary that we generalize to the population. Campus climate surveys, you can get 9 to 15% of your campus responding. So that's an interesting thing from a research method standpoint is what do you do to try to get more people to participate and still have the in-depth questions that you need to actually talk about campus climate. So that would be our second big project that we're working on in that group. And then I think I have like hardly any time left. So I will say one word-ish about the third lab, which is Thrive Health. And I've been working in integrated care settings. The 7 years before I came to UNCC, I was directing a center. And the center was designed to build out integrated healthcare clinics across all of lower Alabama. And it was actually part of a 4-state consortium. And we were funded with sort of millions of dollars from the oil spill, the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico to improve integrated care that was going to low resource or marginalized communities. So I spent 7 years really working on that project. And during that time, I became more and more convinced that not only should we have mental health care seamlessly integrated into your primary care site, but we should also have physicians doing trauma-informed care, which is kind of a push by SAMHSA. So we actually developed a model that we got published in 2019 around how can you help healthcare practitioners actually deliver trauma-informed care. And our model is called BITTEN, and it starts with the idea that some people have already been betrayed by the institution that you work for when they come into the appointment. And that betrayal in combination with their trauma history might produce some different symptoms that you're interested in seeing, some trauma symptoms, right? And all of those things are going to affect their expectations and needs in the healthcare environment. So we laid out this theoretical model, and it was actually published. I co-authored this with a nurse who's an academic nurse, and it was published in the National Journal for Nursing Theories. So of course, when you publish a theory article, people are like, well, that's all great, makes a lot of sense, but does it really work? So we've been testing the theory, and now we've tested it with Ehlers-Danlos patients, which is a very rare disease patient group. We currently have data from a myasthenia gravis group. We have data from college students who are talking about their worst healthcare experience, but they have a sexual assault history, so they have a trauma history. And then we have a different group of college students where their trauma history is childhood trauma. And our model is actually holding up fairly well across these, which is, let's just put it this way. That doesn't happen all the time, right? So we're trying to write up all those papers and get them out in the health group. And in the process, we've gotten interested, while we've been talking about institutional betrayal, we've gotten interested in institutions that don't betray you. And Jennifer Fried has been putting out this kind of notion of institutional courage. Well, we're actually taking that even further and looking at something we're calling institutional integrity. And so we've laid out, we have like 9 domains of what we think an institution that has integrity should do. And we're writing items right now to try to see if we can measure institutional integrity. So we're really excited about that work, and then that's the kind of thing that's so fun because, okay, here's the funnest thing about research. And I know you guys are gonna love this because you're all at this research thing when you do not have to be. The funnest thing about research is that if you have an idea, you can actually figure out how to test it and go get your answer. And so if you are insanely curious, and I prefer to call myself that than a complete busybody. Like my kids are like, stop listening to that person's conversation, right? Like it's really hard for me to just keep my ass in the ball because I am insanely curious. But if you're a curious person, a research career, honestly, is so satisfying. It's like getting the answers to these things that you want to know, and you get to do it. So that's it. That's all I've got.
Well, like I said, the whole showcase needs to be on Dr. Eller because there's your enthusiasm, your interesting work, your knowledge, your experience is just volumes. And I've been teasing her since she arrived last year that I am her biggest fan, and my freaky fanness just keeps going through the roof with.
I appreciate that. It's always nice to have a fan, but so undergrads, I think if you want to go to grad school, getting some research experience is important. There are times when I'm more open to that than others. Usually it's right before the semester starts, right? Typically what that looks like is that your very first experience is not as wondrous as you would love it to be. It's more like, can I enter data? Can I set up things in Qualtrics? Can I do lit searches? I actually am currently looking at people who are in my research methods one class. And one way to get in the lab is to do really well, because not only could you possibly be in my lab, but I can put in a word for you with other people to get you in their lab. And I already know at least one person on this call has already talked to me about this. Like, how do I get involved? What do I do? And, the way is knock my socks off in research methods 1, and I'm going to start talking you up the chain. Like, ooh, we got a really good one here. Right. So you may not think that people notice how well you're doing in the classes, but we do.
Oh, we know.
We notice, and we want you to do well. We want those that want to go on to have the experiences they need to go on. And the sooner you get involved, the more likely you are to have those experiences. Once you've done like a semester in a lab, then you start qualifying for like these summer programs that have money, these other intensive experiences. And then the hook gets set, you know what I mean? Then it's pretty much you're going to be doing research because you're going to figure out that it's pretty awesome and you're going to like it. So I think those are the ways. I think if you're thinking more along the lines of going to like a social work program or something, that maybe I would do what I did first, is that I would try to volunteer at a mental health center, or like, this is really an academic experience. This is, so, I would look at your career path and I would talk to an advisor about it. But I think for a lot of people, this is where we get hands-on experience, and we're going to like it. But it's not for everybody, and also it's hard to get into a lab. It's competitive. You have to show that you have the stuff. That's all I have, Maria.
Very good. And for the sake of our time and that I have a next one to go to here, I can do a couple of things here. Jenny, if you have the time, I think I can make you host or co-host and maybe answer some questions for students. Otherwise, students, I just do want to make you aware of, and I hope am I sharing my other screen, right?
Yes.
I'm on the Department of Psychological Science. I went to People, and if you scroll down, we're in alphabetical order. So here is Dr. Ellar's contact information in terms of where to send an email, follow up. And it's a recurring theme that if you think about a class that you are doing well in, that you really like the material, that you feel like you've connected with a professor, that is a good hint. You are headed in the right direction in terms of a lot of other opportunities, and particularly research groups and labs. So that's an excellent way of connecting. And oh my gosh, we're all gonna go running to your lab. I'm gonna block the students on the way to your lab.
Last year, someone tackled me on the stairwell after this, and he's on 2 manuscripts now.
That's how, be careful, but that's how valuable you can be, right?
Yeah, so sometimes persistence also like differentiates you.
Yes,
You know?
that's true too. Persistence, definitely.
So, I mean, I hate to advise that because, you know, it's hard to receive on this end. It's like, okay. But sometimes that's what it takes too. And also remember that sometimes in a lab like mine, where there's lots and lots of people, you might not get as much attention as you need as an undergrad. And so going to someone who has fewer people might mean you can be the star of the show there. And that's also a really important position. So, you know, and that lab doesn't have to be the most interesting thing ever to you. It's that developmental experience that we're looking for.
Absolutely. So we know students, I think another big theme is that we know students are coming in with no experience really, and we expect that. That's what much of that lab is meant to do, to train get you rolling in your interests and learning research skills, and also learning a lot of good professional skills and being ready to go out there and work with others and find solutions to all kinds of interesting problems.
Exactly.
All
well,
right.
I'm happy to stay on for a minute if anyone has questions.
Do students have questions? Should I make, I'm seeing something come up on the chat.
Saying thank you.
Okay, that's fantastic. Otherwise, I will thank you, Dr. LR. And but please, students, let me know. And Dr. LR, if you have the time, I don't want to throw this on you, but I think I can try and make you co-host while I go to the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah. Students who want to stay on with Dr. LR, feel free to.
If they don't, that's fine. We'll just say goodbye.
Yeah, if not, that's fine too. Okay, but I'm gonna hop on to our next session with Dr. Marianne Arvan. All right. So let's see here. Let's see if I can. I think I can do that. Oh, I'm gonna make you the host. How about that instead of co-host?
That sounds perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. LR. Fantastic.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, comments?